Silence is often seen as a powerful form of communication, an unspoken statement that can carry as much weight as words themselves. It's used as a tool to convey emotions like anger, disappointment or frustration, and at times it becomes a weapon in relationships to punish, manipulate, or demand attention. Yet, in many cases, the silence you choose doesn't have the impact you hope for. You may retreat into quietness, expecting the other person to feel your absence, to respond to your withdrawal, or to change their behavior as a result. But what happens when they don't? When your silence fails to move them, it reveals not only their level of emotional investment, but also deeper truths about you, your approach to conflict, your emotional maturity, and your unspoken need for validation. The assumption behind silence is that it will provoke a reaction. Whether consciously or subconsciously, silence often carries expectations. They will miss me. They will notice I'm upset. They will come back and make it right. When those expectations go unmet, it can leave you feeling even more hurt, confused, or powerless. But here's the reality. Their lack of response doesn't always reflect their indifference. It also exposes your reasons for choosing silence in the first place. Silence may feel like strength, a calm refusal to engage, but in truth, it often signals avoidance, emotional immaturity, or an inability to articulate your feelings constructively. When your silence doesn't affect them, it highlights important questions. Are they emotionally detached? Are they too self-absorbed to notice? Or perhaps, do they simply not place the same value on your relationship as you do? These realizations can be painful, but they also shine a light on your emotional state and what you hope to gain through silence. Ultimately, silence doesn't always speak louder than words. Instead, it often reveals your inner struggles, your fears of confrontation, your inability to express yourself openly, and your need for reassurance from others. By understanding why your silence fails to impact others, you begin to uncover truths about yourself that can lead to personal growth and emotional clarity. Rather than retreating into silence, learning to communicate directly and honestly can strengthen relationships and empower you to resolve conflicts in a healthier way. In the following sections, we will explore the key truths behind why your silence doesn't affect others and what those truths reveal about you. Through this exploration, you will discover how to move away from silence and toward a more open, honest, and emotionally fulfilling way of engaging with the world. Truth number 1. Silence can be misunderstood. Have you ever gone completely silent, convinced that your lack of words would send a powerful message, only to realize the other person didn't notice or didn't care? The reality is that silence doesn't always communicate what you think it does. While you might believe your quiet withdrawal is loud and clear, conveying anger, hurt, or disappointment, others may interpret it completely differently. To them, your silence could mean indifference, acceptance, or even emotional maturity. Imagine this: you're fuming inside, expecting someone to pick up on your absence or tension, and yet they carry on as if nothing happened. How does that make you feel? Frustrated? Invisible? Here's the hard truth. People don't always interpret silence the way we intend. Communication is complicated, and silence leaves too much room for misunderstanding. While you're overthinking what they should realize, they're not mind readers. They might not even recognize your silence as a reaction. This disconnect often stems from the fact that we assume people see the world and us the way we do. When that doesn't happen, we feel overlooked, unimportant, and powerless. But before you get angry, ask yourself, have I really communicated how I feel, or have I just retreated, hoping they'll figure it out on their own? Now, let's make this interactive. Think about the last time you used silence to make a point. Did it work? Did they come running back? apologizing or changing their behavior? Or did it leave you even more frustrated? Drop your experience in the comments below. Was your silence misunderstood, or did it deliver exactly the reaction you wanted? Let's share and reflect, because here's the kicker. Silence only works when the other person is tuned into your emotions. If they aren't, your quiet retreat is wasted energy. Silence might feel powerful, but it's risky. It's like throwing an invisible punch. You know you did it, but no one else felt the impact. If you really want someone to understand you, words are your best tool. Silence is easy. Vulnerability is harder. By learning to speak up and articulate what you're feeling, you stop relying on silent expectations that often lead to disappointment. So, ask yourself, are you being silent because it's easier than saying how you really feel? If so, maybe it's time to stop hiding behind the silence and start having the conversations that matter. Truth number 2. They may not value your voice as much as you assume. Have you ever fallen into the trap of thinking that your silence would make someone realize your worth, only to be met with indifference? It's a harsh reality. Your silence might not affect someone because they don't value your voice as much as you assume. This disconnect can be a bitter pill to swallow, revealing an imbalance in how each party perceives the relationship. Consider this. You're giving someone the silent treatment, expecting them to notice your absence and come running back, filled with remorse. But what if they don't? What if your silence is met with silence? This lack of response can be a glaring indicator that they don't hold your opinions or feelings in high regard. It's not just about them being oblivious, it's about them not placing the same value on your relationship as you do. This realization can be both enlightening and painful. It forces you to confront the possibility that you've been investing emotional energy into someone who doesn't reciprocate that investment. It's like shouting into a void, expecting an echo, but hearing nothing in return. This one-sided dynamic can leave you feeling undervalued and unappreciated. But here's the silver lining. Recognizing this imbalance empowers you to make informed decisions about your relationships. It encourages you to seek connections where your voice is heard, valued, and respected. Instead of wasting your energy on those who don't appreciate you, you can focus on building relationships with individuals who genuinely care about your thoughts and feelings. Now, let's turn this over to you. Have you ever experienced a situation where your silence was met with indifference? How did it make you feel, and what steps did you take afterward? Share your stories in the comments below. Your experiences might resonate with others and provide valuable insights into navigating such challenges. Remember, your voice matters. Don't let anyone's indifference silence it. Seek out those who value your presence and appreciate the unique perspective you bring to the table. After all, life's too short to spend it in relationships where your voice goes unheard. Truth number 3. Silence reflects avoidance, not strength. Have you ever thought that staying silent during a conflict shows your strength and control? In reality, silence often signals emotional avoidance, a defense mechanism to dodge uncomfortable feelings. Instead of confronting issues head-on, you retreat into silence, hoping the problem will disappear on its own. But here's the catch. This avoidance doesn't resolve the issue. It merely sweeps it under the rug, where it can fester and grow. Emotional avoidance isn't a sign of strength, it's a sign of fear. It's the fear of vulnerability, the fear of being judged, and the fear of facing emotions that might be too overwhelming. By choosing silence over open communication, you're not demonstrating control. You're avoiding the very emotions that need to be addressed. This pattern can lead to unresolved conflicts, strained relationships, and a buildup of resentment. But here's the good news. Recognizing this pattern is the first step toward change. By acknowledging that silence is a form of avoidance, you can begin to challenge this behavior. Start by expressing your feelings, even if it's uncomfortable. Open communication fosters understanding and connection, allowing both parties to address issues constructively. Remember, true strength lies in facing your emotions head-on, not in hiding from them. Now, let's hear from you. Have you ever used silence to avoid confronting difficult emotions? How did it affect your relationships? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might resonate with someone else going through a similar situation. Remember, breaking the cycle of emotional avoidance takes time and effort, but it's worth it for healthier, more fulfilling relationships. Truth number 4. They're focused on themselves, not your silence. Ever felt like your silence would make someone realize your absence, only to find them completely unfazed? It's a tough pill to swallow, but the truth is, people are often so wrapped up in their own lives that they don't notice your withdrawal. Your silence might not even register because they're not paying as much attention as you think. This realization can be both eye-opening and disheartening. It forces you to confront the possibility that you've been investing emotional energy into someone who doesn't reciprocate that investment. It's like shouting into a void, expecting an echo, but hearing nothing in return. This one-sided dynamic can leave you feeling undervalued and unappreciated. But here's the silver lining. Recognizing this imbalance empowers you to make informed decisions about your relationships. It encourages you to seek connections where your presence is acknowledged and valued. Instead of wasting your energy on those who don't appreciate you, you can focus on building relationships with individuals who genuinely care about your thoughts and feelings. Now, let's hear from you. Have you ever experienced a situation where your silence was met with indifference? How did it make you feel, and what steps did you take afterward? Share your stories in the comments below. Your experiences might resonate with others and provide valuable insights into navigating such challenges. Remember, your presence matters. Don't let anyone's indifference diminish your value. Seek out those who appreciate you for who you are and cherish the unique perspective you bring to the table. After all, life's too short to spend it in relationships where your presence goes unnoticed. Truth number 5. Silence can be a form of emotional manipulation. Have you ever used silence to punish someone, hoping they'd come crawling back with an apology? Or perhaps you've been on the receiving end, feeling the sting of someone's deliberate withdrawal. This behavior, known as the silent treatment, is more than just a passive response. It's a form of emotional manipulation. By withholding communication, one person attempts to control or coerce the other, creating an atmosphere of anxiety, fear, and sadness. This tactic can lead to feelings of rejection and unworthiness, causing significant distress. Recognizing the silent treatment as a manipulative tactic is crucial. It often stems from a desire to punish, control, or avoid addressing underlying issues. Instead of fostering healthy communication, it creates a toxic environment where one person holds power over the other through silence. This dynamic can erode trust and intimacy, leading to long-term emotional harm. But here's the empowering part. Once you identify this behavior, you can take steps to address it. Open and honest communication is key. Express how the silence affects you and encourage a dialogue that focuses on resolving the underlying issues. Setting clear boundaries and seeking support from trusted individuals or professionals can also help navigate these challenging situations. Now, let's hear from you. Have you ever experienced the silent treatment, either as the giver or the receiver? How did it impact you, and what strategies did you use to cope? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your insights could help others recognize and address this harmful behavior in their own relationships. Remember, silence can be powerful, but it can also be manipulative. By fostering open communication and setting healthy boundaries, you can build stronger, more resilient relationships. Truth number 6. Silence often signals emotional immaturity. Have you ever stayed silent instead of confronting an issue, only to realize that you were avoiding the discomfort of vulnerability? In relationships, silence can often be a sign of emotional immaturity. Rather than addressing issues directly, you choose to retreat into silence, hoping that the problem will resolve itself or that the other person will magically understand what you're feeling. But here's the catch. Real emotional growth doesn't come from avoiding difficult conversations. It comes from having them. This silence can cause problems to snowball, creating an emotional distance that grows over time. Avoiding conflict is easy in the short term, but it only delays the inevitable need to address underlying issues. When we choose silence over communication, we rob ourselves of the opportunity to express our true feelings and grow emotionally. Emotional maturity means having the courage to face uncomfortable conversations and express your feelings, even when it's tough. Silence, on the other hand, might seem like a way to keep the peace, but in reality, it often creates more chaos. It's easy to feel like you're being the bigger person by not reacting, but silence can be a form of passive aggression that only makes things worse in the long run. You might think you're protecting yourself, but you're actually sabotaging the relationship by not allowing your emotions to be heard. What makes this even more damaging is that silence creates an unhealthy dynamic where both people are afraid to open up. Instead of fostering trust, silence can create a wall that pushes you and the other person further apart. This emotional avoidance is not just a reflection of immaturity, but a missed opportunity to build stronger, more transparent relationships. Open communication is the foundation of emotional intelligence, and without it, relationships struggle to thrive. So, how do we break the silence? It starts with self-awareness. If you're finding yourself choosing silence over confrontation time and time again, it might be a sign that you need to work on your emotional expression. Start small. Express how you feel in moments of frustration, disappointment, or even joy. The more you practice being open and vulnerable, the easier it becomes to navigate tough situations without resorting to silence. Now, we want to hear from you. Have you ever used silence as a way to avoid tough conversations? How did it affect your relationship? Or, if you've been on the receiving end of silence, how did it make you feel? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's talk about how we can break free from emotional immaturity and create stronger, more communicative relationships. Together, we can learn to embrace vulnerability and build connections based on trust, not silence. Truth number 7. Silence can be a sign of exhaustion, not indifference. Have you ever found yourself going quiet because you just don't have the energy to engage in yet another argument or discussion? Silence in these moments isn't about ignoring the other person or being indifferent. It's about emotional exhaustion. You're drained from constantly giving, explaining, or trying to make things work. It's as though every word feels like it requires more energy than you have left to give. In relationships, this kind of silence is a clear indicator that you've reached your emotional limit. Instead of expressing frustration or anger, you pull back simply because you're too tired to deal with the emotional weight of another conversation. But here's the problem. The other person may interpret this silence as a lack of care or interest. They might think you're upset with them or that you're choosing not to engage. In reality, it's not that you don't care. It's just that you're too worn out to go through another emotional exchange. This can lead to misunderstandings and unnecessary tension, making things even more complicated. This exhaustion can stem from long periods of conflict, neglect, or even just a build-up of small frustrations that haven't been addressed. At this point, Silence can be a defense mechanism that shields you from further emotional burnout. While it's easy for the other person to assume you're simply ignoring them, it's essential to recognize that silence can also be a protective mechanism. If you're constantly being pulled into debates or arguments, silence allows you to retreat, gather your thoughts, and prevent saying things in the heat of the moment that you might regret. In these instances, silence isn't about being passive or cold. It's about protecting your emotional well-being. It's a way to preserve your mental energy until you're in a place where you can communicate more effectively. However, while silence can be an emotional safeguard, it can also prolong unresolved issues. If you stay silent for too long, you risk allowing the buildup of resentment or creating more distance between you and the other person. To avoid this, it's important to find a balance. Take the time you need to recharge, but also communicate when you're ready. Let the other person know that you're not avoiding them, but that you simply need space to process your emotions. This can help to reduce misunderstandings and pave the way for more meaningful, productive conversations down the road. Now, let's talk about it. Have you ever experienced this kind of emotional exhaustion that led to silence? How did the other person interpret it? Did you find ways to express that you were just tired, not disinterested? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Understanding and discussing these moments of emotional exhaustion can help everyone handle them better when they arise, reducing stress and building healthier communication in relationships. It's crucial to realize that sometimes silence is just a sign that we need rest, emotionally and mentally. Truth number 8. Silence can reveal a lack of emotional intelligence. Have you ever noticed that some people seem to shut down entirely when confronted with emotional conversations? Instead of listening, understanding, or responding thoughtfully, they become completely silent. This silence often reveals a deeper issue, a lack of emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence involves the ability to recognize, understand, and manage our own emotions while also being able to empathize with others. When someone refuses to engage in meaningful conversation or shuts down emotionally, it can be a sign that they struggle with processing their emotions or understanding the emotions of others. It's easy to think that silence is a harmless response, but in reality, it can be a barrier to emotional growth. When someone remains silent in the face of conflict or emotional needs, they are often avoiding the vulnerability that comes with open communication. They may not know how to express their feelings, or they may fear that revealing their true emotions will make them seem weak. Instead of working through the discomfort, they choose silence as a way to protect themselves from feeling exposed. This emotional avoidance doesn't just limit their growth, it limits the growth of the relationship too. Imagine trying to have an important discussion, sharing your feelings with someone who is silently retreating. It feels like you're talking to a wall, doesn't it? This lack of emotional response can leave you feeling unheard and invalidated. A lack of emotional intelligence doesn't just hinder communication, it creates an emotional barrier that can be hard to break down. Relationships thrive when both individuals can communicate openly, express vulnerability, and understand each other's feelings. When one person shuts down, the relationship stagnates, leaving both parties stuck in a cycle of misunderstanding and frustration. But here's the good news. Emotional intelligence can be developed. If you or someone you know struggles with emotional expression or is prone to shutting down during tough conversations, it's possible to improve these skills. It starts with self-awareness, recognizing when emotions are being avoided and understanding the impact of that silence. From there, it's about practicing healthy communication, taking the time to express thoughts and feelings, and being willing to listen with empathy when others do the same. Emotional intelligence doesn't come overnight, but it's a lifelong journey that can transform relationships for the better. Now, let's hear from you. Have you ever experienced a situation where someone's silence made you feel like your emotions didn't matter? Or perhaps you've been the one shutting down and realized it was limiting your emotional growth. Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. How do you think emotional intelligence plays a role in communication? Let's talk about how we can all work towards being more emotionally intelligent and improving the quality of our relationships. The more we share and learn from each other, the better we can all become at navigating tough conversations without retreating into silence. Truth number 9. Silence can reveal unspoken expectations. Have you ever stayed silent in a situation because you expected someone to read your mind? You wanted them to understand how you felt without having to say a word, but they didn't get it, and your silence only left things unresolved. This is a key issue in many relationships: unspoken expectations. Instead of communicating openly about what you need, you assume that the other person should just know. Silence in this case becomes a weapon of passive-aggressive communication, where your frustration builds because your needs aren't being met, but you haven't actually expressed what those needs are. It's an invisible barrier that, if not addressed, can cause huge misunderstandings and tension. The problem with unspoken expectations is that they are often unrealistic. No one can fully understand your thoughts and emotions without you expressing them. By staying silent, you place an unfair burden on the other person to intuitively know what you're feeling, and when they inevitably don't meet your expectations, resentment builds. It's a trap that many of us fall into without realizing it. We think that by being silent we're making a point, or that the other person should be able to figure it out, but this only deepens the emotional gap between you. Silence may seem like a way to get someone's attention, but it actually prevents true connection. What's even more challenging is that the person on the receiving end of this silence often feels confused or frustrated. They don't know what went wrong or how to fix it. Meanwhile, you're left stewing in your own frustration, assuming they should just know what you need. This miscommunication can result in resentment building up over time, and if not addressed, it can eventually lead to emotional distance or a breakdown in the relationship. The silence becomes a wall instead of a bridge, creating more space between you and the other person instead of bringing you closer. So, what's the solution? It's simple. Start communicating your expectations clearly. Instead of expecting others to read between the lines, speak up about what you need and want. Sure, it's not always easy, and it requires vulnerability, but it's the only way to avoid the trap of silence-based misunderstandings. When you express your thoughts, you open up the opportunity for others to meet your needs and have a productive conversation about it. Healthy relationships thrive on clarity, and that can only happen when we stop assuming and start talking. Now, let's dive deeper. Have you ever had unspoken expectations that led to silence in your relationships? How did it affect things? And what did you do to break the cycle? Or maybe you've been on the receiving end of someone's silence and felt the weight of unspoken frustration. How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below. Let's start a conversation about the importance of clear communication and how we can all improve our relationships by expressing our needs openly instead of letting silence speak for us. Your insights could help someone else break free from the cycle of unspoken expectations and improve their emotional connections. Truth number 10. Silence can be a powerful tool for self-reflection. Have you ever experienced a moment of silence and realized it wasn't about the other person at all, it was about you? Silence, when used intentionally, can be an incredibly powerful tool for self-reflection. In a world where we're constantly bombarded by noise, distractions, and external expectations, taking a step back and embracing silence allows us the space to reconnect with our inner selves. Instead of reacting impulsively or emotionally in a conversation or conflict, Silence can give us the time to process our feelings, thoughts, and reactions, helping us make more thoughtful decisions moving forward. It's in these moments of quiet that we often discover what truly matters to us, what our boundaries are, and what we need from ourselves and others. However, this silence needs to be intentional. It's not about shutting down or avoiding the situation. It's about pausing to gather your thoughts and emotions before responding. When we are caught up in the heat of a moment, whether it's an argument, a difficult conversation, or a tough decision, silence can offer us clarity. It prevents us from saying things we might regret and gives us the opportunity to assess what we really want to convey. By taking a moment to breathe, we allow ourselves to come from a place of understanding and wisdom, not from a place of emotional reaction. This type of silence fosters growth, not stagnation. In relationships, we often expect immediate responses, but sometimes the best response is no response at all, at least for a moment. By taking that pause, you show that you respect the situation enough to not rush into an answer. This doesn't mean you should ignore the problem, but it allows you to approach it from a more composed and thoughtful perspective. Whether you're processing your feelings or figuring out how to express them more clearly, silence helps clear the fog and gives you the clarity needed for healthy communication. But here's the catch. Too much silence can be just as damaging. If you withdraw from a conversation or a relationship entirely, it can cause distance and confusion. The key is balance. Use silence as a tool for self-reflection, but don't let it be your default mode of communication. Use it to understand yourself better, then open up when you're ready to share your insights with others. When done right, this kind of silence can actually strengthen your relationships by helping you communicate more authentically. So, what do you think? Have you ever used silence as a tool to gain clarity or reflect on your emotions? How has it helped you in tough situations? Or maybe you've found yourself overwhelmed by silence in a relationship, unsure of how to break through it. Let's talk about it in the comments below. Your experiences could inspire others to see silence in a new light, not as avoidance, but as an opportunity for personal growth and deeper connection. Share your thoughts. Let's learn together how to harness the power of silence for self-reflection and better relationships. Conclusion: embracing the power of silence. As we've explored, silence can carry multiple meanings depending on the context and the individuals involved. It can be a form of self-protection, a sign of emotional immaturity, or even a powerful tool for self-reflection and growth. The key is understanding that silence isn't inherently good or bad. It's how we use it that matters. Whether it's withdrawing from conflict to process our emotions, using silence as a defense mechanism to avoid confrontation, or simply taking a pause to gain clarity, silence plays a crucial role in the way we communicate and relate to others. However, silence also carries risks if not handled consciously. When used to avoid addressing issues, create emotional distance, or manipulate others, it can become a barrier to connection and understanding. The challenge is finding the right balance, using silence as a means of personal reflection and emotional regulation, while also ensuring that it doesn't lead to misunderstandings or unresolved conflict. Communication, after all, is at the heart of every healthy relationship, and silence, when balanced with openness and vulnerability, can enhance it rather than hinder it. Now, we want to hear from you. How has silence played a role in your relationships, and what have you learned from those experiences? Have you ever used silence intentionally for self-reflection, or has it ever caused miscommunication or emotional distance? Share your thoughts in the comments below.